last time we discussed about the startup funding process, wherein we saw that, basis your valuation, either an angel investor or a venture capitalist you can approach, and they fund you according to the valuation that they feel is appropriate. And the different investors, be it an angel investor or a venture capitalist, both of them look at businesses from a different perspective. Some might want to A venture capitalist is only interested in the return on on his investments, whereas a angel investor is more keen on contributing and helping build your business in terms of networking and things like that. So when it comes to valuation, we do have a couple of methods of value. There are many methods of valuation, but we will be in our discussion today restricting to three methods that we will be discussing, which are most commonly used for the purpose of valuations. So let us look at what these are. So obviously valuations is going to be different for an existing public listed company and a startup. How those are different? Obviously, because a listed company is an established business, it has a strong revenue and earnings. So there is a track record, there is a history to it. And definitely then those valuations happen on the basis of your EBITDA, that is your earnings before interest, depreciation and amortization. So your EBITDA is the basis in which a public limited company can go in for valuations. So valuations for a publicly listed company, they might be 5 years, 10 years in business, and they want to get their business valued. It is a lot simpler because they have a track record of revenue, a revenue cycle that they have the earnings in place. So all you need to do is whatever is the EBITDA over a period of time, just a multiple of that becomes your valuation. So that's a lot more simpler. So valuers find it a lot more easier to value companies with EBITDA because they are publicly listed, and basis on industry specific, there are multiples. So let's say an FMCG would be valued at a certain multiple, a pharma company would be valued at a different multiple. So basis on the industry specifics, the valuation takes place in case of public listed companies, and that is multiplied by your EBITDA. But in case of startups, it is a very initial stage. The business is not yet grown. There is no proper structure or a revenue model or earnings model that is still available. So in that case, there are a lot of challenges for valuation of a new venture. And since startups are at the initial stage of business with little or almost no revenue, it becomes a lot more difficult for people to take EBITDA as a benchmark, or take profits, or take turnover as a benchmark, because that is obviously going to increase in the near future. So hardly the business has been 1 year 2 years in business with the bootstrapping funding that they have had. So it becomes very difficult to value a startup, but yet there are certain methods that are adopted. We will be focusing our discussion for the coming 40-45 minutes on three commonly used methods for startup valuation. One of which is comparable price method, that is you seek a comparison. The next is the scorecard method. So you have certain characteristics or values for which you maintain a scorecard and arrive at the valuation. We look at it how. And the third is obviously the discounted cash flow. So how are you going to be discounting your cash flows? More so, uh, an investor, what we discussed last time, is interested in your unique idea, unique business. But more important than the business, they're also very much focused on the founders, the owners of the business, how coachable they are. That is the one thing that investors look into. If you're going to be going to an investor forum and talking that I know this much and I have an investment of this much, I am looking for investors, I have put in so much and this is my idea. So that attitude, when you showcase in front of an investor, they look at you as a non-coachable person. And anybody who's putting in money would like to drive the business in the way they would like to drive it. So obviously investors look into founders who are coachable, whom they can direct, especially more so angel investors, whom they can direct, and they can groom their business, and also they grow their equity along with the founders equity in the business. So that is where investors look in. And keeping in mind that yes, the numbers play a very significant role, which are prima facie available on record in terms of books, it's more to do with people in case of a startup. Established company, okay, EBITDA is there, numbers are there, turnover is there, all figures are in place and audited, so it becomes a lot more simpler. Here it's more people driven, and that's where the scorecard method, when I discuss more so, or a discounted cash flow, it will be more on the human traits, more on the human capital that we will be talking about. So let's just quickly go through each of these methods one by one. The first one is the comparable price method. Obviously, this is one of the simplest method of valuations. Here you can value a startup by comparing it with another. So like if there is a startup in the waste management industry, so what are the other startups in the waste management industry doing? So I select a comparison with same sort of a startup in the other area. So what are the benchmarks that one would do valuation or do the comparison to arrive at a valuation? They could be similar terms like what is the marginal rate of return of company A and company B? What is the growth rate of company A and company B? Production cycles, what are the two different cycles, whether it's manual or it's system driven? How much system investments is required? What are the revenue flows? How are they planned to generate their revenue? With these benchmarks, they will compare company A with company B. So A and B are compared basis terms like these. So what is the growth? What is the production cycle? What is the revenue cycle? Revenue flows? These are the normal terms which are taken into consideration because everybody is interested in bottom line. So revenue flows becomes important. Production cycle, because that's the cost part of it. Growth, how far you can grow. Thanks, Kedar. So I'll just continue with, I hope I'm not too fast. Okay. So when I'm doing a comparison, let's say the investor is doing a comparison, company A vis-a-vis company B, they are looking into these broad parameters, the revenue generation, the cycle, the production cycle, and generally how the company is performing, what is the growth of this segment or of this area, whether digitization is in or not, how the owners of it are looking at the business. So these are the generally ways in which the comparison is made between two companies and a valuation is arrived at. So if let's say company A, which is some other company, and your company is say company B, so an investor will say, okay, fine, a company in this industry is valued at 10 lakhs at in the second year of business, so your also company will be valued at 10 lakhs in the second year of business. So that is the way valuations are arrived using comparable price method. It's not a very accurate way, obviously, because there are a lot of estimates that has been done, or assumptions, so to speak, have been made for valuing your startup. So obviously it's not a very you can say very accurate way, but definitely it's easy. And at the initial stage where the first year or so when you are going for funding, this seems to be a more appropriate way, because the only way you can look at it is how others are performing in the same sector or in the same area. The next type of method is the scorecard method. So this is typically used by angel investors. So angel investors prefer the scorecard method. Now, what is scorecard method? They assign weights to the measure of success. So how can you do that? Again, what is the measure of success is the people of the business, the people who are there in the business. So weights are assigned to these measures, like what is the, who are the founders, who's the co-founder, what is their team experience, what is the production strength of this company, how much capital they can put in to build up the setup of the company, who are the competitors of this particular industry in the market. So it's all more so people driven and more of the project that they're taking up vis-a-vis the entire industry benchmark. So they are going to assign certain weights to each of these measures, and they will see whether it is successful or not. So let's say they assign a weight ki team is more important, how the team is going to perform is more important as one, and say competition being the second, and the production strength being the third. So they will rank it that way and multiply it with a certain value that they arrive, and that will give the total value of the startup. So what is the, if I talk about team experience, product strength, does the product has competition in the market, what is the development stage of the product life cycle, whether it is at the prototype stage, whether it is fully advanced, how soon it can go out to the market, how soon it is going to be saleable. This all comparisons will help your startup vis-a-vis the startups on an average in the same area or industry. So your startup, let's say team experience is one at the first, according to the investor, The product development stage, let's say, is 2, and third is competition in the market. So let's say they assign these 3 weights. Now for these 3 points, they are going to weight with the other startups in the same industry, in the same area. Okay, so they will look at, okay, this is the team experience of this company, what is the team experience of the similar kind of company in this area who are starting up their businesses. So that is how valuation would be arrived using the scorecard method. So you are assigning a score to everything. You're going to be assigning a value, a score to everything that you are going to compare it with the industry average and compare it. So if the startup is having higher value, if you're, sorry, I just missed that point. Yeah, so now you're going to be comparing those, and if your startups looks to have an above average qualities, that means your team experiences, you have got good people in your team who have a lot of experience, who are from an industry background which is very well known and renowned. They have been amongst, the top management level, and have brought in their experience to your project, then that's considered as a good company. So that way they will look at what are the qualities of your team members, and accordingly they will do the calculation. The chances are here that you will get a higher, you can get a higher valuation if you have a very good product and a very good team. So if these two are very good, an angel investor is going to be very judgmental about it, and definitely they will give you a higher valuation, because they are looking at the people. As I already mentioned in the beginning, if you are coachable, that means your team has certain experience and is always willing to learn. So I can put my money, I can teach them, I can guide them. That's how an investor will look at, more so angel investor. The next is about the discounted cash flow, the last one that we are talking about amongst the three. How much cash flow a startup will produce over a long term. This is more so to do with the calculations, that is, you prepare a discounted cash flow table. So what will be the benchmark for this? It is again a forecasting mechanism. You are not going to have a entire cash flow on hand, but when we were doing the business plan, we discussed upon how we can arrive at certain financial numbers, projected balance sheets, and projected numbers that we can prepare while preparing the business plan. So what you expect in the coming 2 or 3 years can be prepared in the form of a projected a statement of account. From there, they will look at cash flow. What is their burn rate? What is the cash burn rate? So let's say if you're putting in a cash, how you are going to utilize that cash and burn out, how are you going to manage your expenses with the cash that is put in. So again, it's a forecasting thing. There are assumptions underlying that, and basis those are assumptions, but somewhere some level of accuracy can be arrived, because it is ultimately benchmarking your company with what you expect in return. So today or tomorrow you are trying to reach to that level what you have said as your expected number. So it seems to be more of a accurate calculation in most of the cases. Because if I'm saying that I'm going to make a turnover of say 10 crore in the next 1 year, so am I capable of making the 10 crore? If I'm not, I will work towards making that, right? So that number is not an ad hoc number. It is something that the owner or the startup owner is forecasted in his mind, and basis that it becomes a lot more easier for the investor to do the calculation of the return on investment that he is looking at basis those forecasting numbers. So obviously there are assumptions made about the valuation, but then yes, it is more, you can say the discounted cash flow method is more of a practical in terms of numbers and calculations. It's not ad hoc. This method is obviously dependent on the discounted rate taken and the risk factors considered. So while we are taking into the factor that I am expecting so much turnover and I'm expecting this kind of a revenue in the next 4 or 5 years, that can be taken at a discounted rate. At the same time, companies would or investors would look at the risk factor. What are the things that could come in the way of this kind of a startup? What are the broad risks in this area of business? What are the major risks that can be arrived at, in a business like the one that they are trying to value at? So that is again taken into consideration. The method relies on the ability of the analyst, obviously, and the discounting rate that is used. So your analyst, obviously, who are into valuations, qualified valuers would be called to do this kind of a valuation, and these valuers will apply their ability basis that particular segment or that particular industry or area where your startup is. And basis the discounted rate, they will also consider that, what are the high risk factors and low risk factors for this company, and arrive at a valuation. So that is how you use the discounted cash flow. Obviously, calculation wise, it's like you arrive at a discounted factor, like how you have the present value factor, which people calculate today in case of your investments, long term investments, how it's again a projection of your life, right? You have this insurance plans coming in, again that uses discounted cash flow method. So similarly, you have the discounted cash flow method basis the business risk that is there. So all of this relies on two major factors: your analyst's ability to judge in that area. So generally, he or she is an expert valuer in that area of business, and he or she considers the risk factors which are there and take them into account while valuing this discounted cash flow, while using the discounted cash flow method. Now, there are many more methods also for valuation. We are not, in the interest of time, being only 40 minutes for the call, we're not going to go into this, but majorly these are the 3-4 methods. Again, there is something like growth vis-a-vis the company growth factor. So a lot of angel investors look at how your growth strategy is, how your future plans are, and what are the others in the same industry doing. Again, I would call that a comparison method for growth. So there are different methods, but generally, broadly, these three are the common ones which are used for valuing a startup. Now, with what valuation is good? Is it good to have a high valuation or a low valuation? And what is a high valuation and what is a low valuation? How do you know that, again, here you're going to use benchmark numbers. You're going to use benchmark numbers vis-a-vis your competitors, vis-a-vis the other startups in the same area of business. So what is a good valuation? Whether it is too high is good or too low is good. Let's look at both the angles. So let's say your business in the first year is valued at 10 CR. Others in the same area are valued between 8 and 10 CR in the first year of business. So that is an average that you cannot say is low or high. That is the average. So you should keep 1 2 CR margin up and down. That is perfect. But if your business is valued at 10 crores and the others in the industry are lying at 6 and 7 crores, then your is overvalued. Similarly, when I say that, your business is 10 CR, where the other in the industry are sitting at 15 CR in the first year of business, then you are undervaluing your business. That is how you know whether actually you're too high or too low of a valuation. Now let's look at the, what if you are undervaluing your business? What happens if you are or if you arrive at a valuation? See, many people think that if I value my business low, my investors will benefit. So more equity will be taken in your business because the value of your business is low. You will get good amount of funding. So let's say instead of 15 crores, your business is valued at 10 crores. So it's undervalued. Others in the industry are valuing it, let's say at 15 crores. You are valuing at 10 crores. Means your valuation is genuinely undervalued. Now, in such an example, what will happen? You will have to shell out equity of 10 CR. Equity against, so if it's a 10%, it will be 10%, not of 15 CR, but of 10 CR. So obviously you are going to be giving out more equity, but you can get more funding also. No, you will be getting 10% funding of your 10 CR because out of your 10 CR funding. So you will get some hefty funding in the initial stage, but there will be a larger loss of equity as and when your valuation starts growing, because others might have grown twofold, threefold. That valuation is always higher. So loss of equity to offer for any future investors. So again, when in the beginning only you are giving away your equity, now gradually you will have to give equity to the next round and the third round also. That time you will have less of equity because your rights are getting diluted. As I mentioned, that anti-dilution clause last session is there in the investor agreement. So let's say today you're taking on 10 CR a 10% fund, 10% stake you're diluting. Then again you'll go for less, 10% of the 90%, then 10% of the 80%, and so on. your value, your rights start getting diluted faster. But if it was 15 cr or 20 cr, then obviously you have more bucket in your hand, so you will lose equity very faster if your business is undervalued. Let's look at the other side, the flip side to it. You'll say, oh wow, I've got a fantastic valuation, but if it's overvalued, it's good, but there's a catch to this also, because obviously you can raise more funds without giving in more equity. So obviously your equity vis-a-vis your funding would be good, but at the same time, if you're showcasing a very good picture about your business and getting a very good valuation for your business, you attract the wrong kind of investors. People might just look at out of the greed of the return on investment and put money or give money to you. They might actually not be capable of building up a future relation. Because see, when you talk about shelling out a stake in your company as an equity or a major equity holder, that investor generally should be someone who is going to nurture your business the way you are going to do. Even though he is a venture capitalist interested in only your return on investment, but still he or she will somewhere or the other make sure that he is putting in the right kind of capital. But if you're going to do overvaluation and show a very rosy picture in the beginning, you might attract people who might just go for the glam of it and later on take out their investment. Then you will be at a loss in future. So the difficulty is to keep it's difficult to keep inflating the value to attract future. So as I said, now you're only valuing it high. Later on, when you go for the next round, when your business has grown and developed a little more, you will go for second round of funding. At that time, to inflate your value from, let's say, instead of 10 you have taken 20 cr, 20 say you can move to 30, you cannot move to 50. Whereas if you have already started at 10 and you move to 30, you still have a gap of 30. Yes, Kedar. Yes, Kedar, you raised your hand. Huh, okay. What stake of liability does an investor take while pouring in his money? Uh, what stake of liability does an investor pour in? As in, you are shelling out your equity, na? So your equity becomes less. No, I did not get your question. Discounting rate differs from liability. I get that. But see, what I'm trying to say is that you are giving a stake in the company, na? You are actually converting your investor rights, your 100% stake. Say you're shelling out 10 and you become a 90% holder in the company. Okay, I got. Okay, now I understood what you mean to say. So let's say, for example, LLP versus directorship. You're saying, na. So let's say if it is a LLP company, there is a certain ratio. But whether it is when it is the directors, again, they are the signatories to the memorandum with equal stake. All are equal, no. In case of directorship, in LLP you will have a certain share. Same way, you are a owner of a company. You are having 100% the shares of the company. So you are the director of the company. Today I'm taking another equity. I'm taking, let's say, an angel investor for 10%. So I am giving my 10% shares to him and I become 90%. So I have discounted that part, no. But if my business is overvalued, okay, it looks good. Instead of 10%, I might have to shell out 15%. But again, the next round when I go, I will have to increase the price because I have grown my business by then, which I discussed in the last session. So every time I cannot inflate a already inflated figure. And as a result, what will happen? People will come in just because it looks rosy in the beginning. They will put the money. And when they find that it's not worth it and you've not done a great job, they will move out of it because of overvaluation. So that's what I wanted to bring out over here. I hope that clarifies. All right. So obviously, the next round when you go, it will be difficult to again increase your price for better funding. Now, if the investor finds that, in the beginning you have shown a very beautiful picture and overvalued your business, and now it's not actually that good, you might, that investor might start losing faith and might withdraw the funds. So they will say that, they will not have a very good relation with this business. And second, and more important, so which is not on paper or which is not in black and white, is the fact that investors have their own lobby. If one investor moves out, they spread a word, so nobody else is going to fund you, because they know that this person is only going to show a rosy picture and, um, get money from you. So that is the stake that you carry while you're overvaluing your business. It could be that, the investor might not find, okay, fine, this person has cheated me just to take more money, he has overvalued his business, I'm not going to be in good terms with it, and I'm moving out with my money. That is okay. He will move out with his money, but he will also go and tell 10 other investors, please don't put in your money over here, because these people are not good, or they are just overvaluing their business and they're just showcasing a beautiful picture. So be very, very careful while you are looking at, okay, fine, just by overvaluation you will get great funds. So yeah, I mean, there are different startup valuation methods, and they provide very different results also at different stages of growth. Again, when I talked about comparison method at the beginning and comparison benchmarks towards the second stage or third stage, all of them would be different, because your business is also growing. So how much demographics, what is the market size, how much more it has expanded, those parameters will keep changing. Those scores, those benchmark scores will keep evaluating as and when your business starts growing. And irrespective of the method you adopt, try to be as accurate as possible in terms of numbers. Try to be, when you're we did this while we were doing the business plan also, that when we are doing a projection of the financial statements as a part of your business plan, you need to make sure that you are putting because ultimately that is a picture that you want to see. So make sure that you're putting the numbers, if not exact, obviously exact will not be possible, but try to be it as accurate as possible. What do you look at to achieve in 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, put that in numbers, crystallize that as much as you can see. And if you see that there are challenges, reduce that, that's perfectly okay. Because it's important that you get a almost accurate, there's nothing like accurate exact valuation, but almost accurate. Like, you can put three expert valuers in three different rooms, give them the same amount of data, yet you will find different valuations coming across. Obviously they have it with their set of assumptions and things like that, but that is how valuation is dynamic. That's how, that much dynamic valuation is as a subject. So when you're trying to give data, when you're trying to give any numbers or any projections for valuations, try to be as accurate as possible. And each of these methods has its own advantages and disadvantages. We can look at one valuer will say that comparable price is good in the initial stage. One valuer may say discounted cash flow is good because you already have a projected balance sheet. So it completely depends from the view of the valuer who's valuing your business and who's an expert in that industry area. So best is be just, be fair in your valuation of your startup business. That's only so only that will give you positive relations with your investors. And having a positive relation with investors is very, very important, because they are the ones who will be spreading the good or the bad word about you. So if you're good and they feel that this is going to be a fantastic project, they will obviously spread a good word about it and set the tone right from the beginning. So that was all about valuations topic that I wanted to discuss. Any questions that you would like to add on or ask me so far? The next session, the next Saturday session that I thought I'll take up is, I had two things in mind. We could do either on how to build great teams, or we could talk on this thing, 10 mistakes which entrepreneurs make, because this is more important, because in the startup journey, many. Okay, fine, sure. You can always get back to me with your questions, not an issue. So I was thinking of either doing 10 mistakes which startups make, or building on teams, because again you need to have a duplicatable process, you need to have teams in your company to make sure that the business runs in the right fashion. So any one of this is what I'll be taking up next, and the subsequent session accordingly. So we look at basically 10 top 10 mistakes, or top 8 or 9 mistakes which entrepreneurs make in their initial journey, and then we'll move on to building teams, setting your business on autopilot mode, and growing your business. So that's all for today's session. Thank you for your time and patient listening. I think we are on time for the Zoom call as well. Yeah, thank you.